Sister Maria Florentine had always been the picture of serenity. Her quiet devotion, soft-spoken voice, and unwavering discipline had made her one of the most respected nuns at St. Anne's Convent in upstate New York. Tucked away in a small town near the Hudson Valley, the convent was a peaceful place. Rows of pine trees swayed gently around the chapel, and the silence was broken only by the tolling of bells and the rhythmic turning of Bible pages. But lately, that peace had begun to feel hollow. Each morning, after leading hymns and teaching catechism to local children, Maria would retire to the convent's old library. It was her favorite place, dusty, dimly lit, and filled with shelves that stretched to the ceiling, holding centuries of forgotten texts. She often found solace there, nestled between history and scripture. But over the past few weeks, something had changed. An unsettling curiosity had begun to stir inside her. A yearning for something deeper. Something unspoken. She couldn't quite place it, but she could feel it, like an ache behind her ribs. One chilly October afternoon, as orange leaves danced outside the stained glass windows, Maria stumbled upon a forgotten manuscript wedged between a stack of Latin theological texts. Its cover was worn leather, cracked and flaking at the edges, with no title, only a strange crescent moon and star embossed in gold. It was nothing like the others. Her fingers hesitated before opening it, as if something sacred, or dangerous, lay within. When she finally flipped it open, she saw pages of Arabic script, flowing like poetry, accompanied by rough Latin translations scribbled in the margins. At first, she assumed it was a historical text, perhaps about early Christianity in the East. But then she saw the name, Muhammad, over and over again. Her heart paused. She had heard of the Prophet Muhammad before, of course, mostly in theological debates or history lessons about other religions. But this was different. She read on. The text described Muhammad not as an enemy of the church, nor as a political figure, but as a deeply spiritual man, humble, generous, unwavering in his belief in one God. It spoke of his love for the poor, his insistence on justice, his respect for women, and his tireless pursuit of truth and mercy. It described a life of sacrifice and service, filled with prayer, compassion, and wisdom. Maria read for hours, her world narrowing down to the soft rustle of paper and the flickering candle beside her. She felt something stir inside her, like a long-forgotten memory, like truth knocking on the doors of her soul. And when she finally looked up, the sky outside had turned dark. That night sleep refused to visit her. Lying on her narrow bed, she kept replaying the words she'd read. It wasn't just the teachings themselves, it was the feeling. The deep, resonant peace they brought to her heart. A peace she hadn't felt in years. But also fear. What was she doing? She was a nun, devoted to the church since she was 19. Her entire life was structured around prayers, service, and vows of loyalty to the Catholic faith. What would it mean if she believed something else, something beyond the cross? The next morning, she tried to go about her usual duties, lighting candles in the chapel, preparing bread for communion, helping organize the Sunday school schedule. But her heart wasn't in it. The manuscript had unsettled her deeply, and she knew she needed to return to it. That night, long after the other sisters had gone to bed, Maria slipped quietly into the library. Her bare feet patted softly on the wooden floor. With trembling hands, she pulled the manuscript from its hiding place. And read. She read about how the Prophet Muhammad never sought wealth or power, but lived simply, sleeping on mats of straw, feeding the poor, forgiving his enemies. She read how he spoke about the oneness of God, about sincerity in prayer, about mercy being greater than vengeance. One line struck her deeply. Whoever does not show mercy will not be shown mercy. Tears welled in her eyes. This was no threat to her faith. This was light. Each night became a secret ritual. The manuscript became her sanctuary. A doorway to something she didn't yet understand, but needed desperately to explore. But her secret wasn't well kept for long. Sister Catherine, the senior nun who had mentored Maria for years, noticed the change. Maria was quieter than usual, her eyes distant during morning prayers, her questions more frequent and complex. One afternoon, as they were folding altar linens together, Sister Catherine placed a gentle hand on Maria's arm. "Is something troubling you, dear?" she asked with a concerned smile. Maria looked up, startled. She tried to shake her head, but her lips trembled. I don't know." Sister Catherine leaned in. "You've been searching. I can see it. Sometimes God lets us wrestle with our faith to lead us to something deeper. But you must be careful. The world outside this convent is full of confusion." Maria nodded, but inside, she felt a storm rising. She wanted to scream that the world inside the convent had become the confusion, that the manuscript spoke more clearly to her heart than anything she'd heard from the pulpit in years. She didn't speak, but that night, she returned to the library again. She needed to know more. She needed to decide. Was this just intellectual curiosity? Or was God guiding her towards something else? A few pages deeper into the manuscript, she found a passage that spoke of Islam's emphasis on intention, that God judges the heart above all. That even a small act, if done with sincerity, is more beloved to God than a grand display done for show. It was like her soul took a breath it had been holding for years. She closed the manuscript slowly, her fingers resting on the strange crescent and star. Her eyes closed. In that moment, she felt it, not just peace, but certainty. She didn't yet know what she was going to do, but she knew one thing: her life would never be the same. The days that followed were heavy. Sister Maria Florentine tried to carry on as if nothing had changed, but inside, everything had. Every prayer she led felt hollow. Every hymn she sang rang empty. She still wore her habit, still attended Vespers, still taught Scripture, but her heart was elsewhere, quietly echoing with the words she had read in the ancient manuscript. One morning, as frost clung to the convent windows and the chapel smelled of candle wax and cedarwood, Maria stood before the crucifix and whispered, "God, show me the truth. Whatever it is." That same afternoon, Sister Catherine appeared in Maria's room. Her expression was calm, but her voice carried weight. "Maria," she said gently, "the Archdiocese has received word that you've been reading materials not authorized by the Church. They want to speak with you." Maria's heart dropped. "Who told them?" "We have rules for a reason," Sister Catherine replied. "It's not about punishment. It's about protecting the faith." Later that week, Maria found herself in the convent's private meeting hall. The air was thick with incense. A few senior nuns sat in silence, while across from her sat Monsignor Keating, a calm, sharp-eyed man who had been with the diocese for decades. He folded his hands. "Sister Maria, we've been made aware that you've been spending a significant amount of time with non-Christian texts, particularly writings related to Islam. We would like to understand why." Maria swallowed hard. This was the moment she had feared, and yet, strangely, she felt calm. "I didn't seek them out," she said, her voice clear. "I found an old manuscript in the library. I read it. It spoke to me. It filled a silence I didn't even know was in my soul." There was a long pause. Monsignor Keating nodded slightly, but his expression remained stern. "You know the Church forbids exploration of other theologies without approval. Especially faiths that contradict our doctrine." "I'm not rebelling," Maria said quietly. "I'm searching." Sister Catherine's voice was soft but firm. "Maria, people have given their lives to this order. This life. This church. Are you saying it's not enough?" "I'm saying," Maria said, eyes welling, "that maybe truth isn't owned by any one place." The silence in the room was deafening. When Maria returned to her room that night, her hands trembled as she packed a few books and letters into a canvas tote bag. Her heart was heavy, but her mind was clear. She couldn't stay. Not out of defiance, but out of truth. That night, she walked silently out of the convent's back entrance, the gravel crunching beneath her worn shoes. The November air was cold on her face. She looked up at the night sky, scattered with stars, and whispered, "Guide me." She didn't have a destination, only a direction. South. For years she had heard about a quiet town in New Mexico where people of all faiths came for spiritual retreat, Santa Fe. Artists, seekers, monks, Muslims, mystics, all had walked its adobe streets. Something about that felt safe. Maria took a Greyhound bus, sleeping upright under fluorescent lights and unfamiliar murmurs. She ate quietly at rest stops, keeping her hood up, still unsure of what she had just done. And yet, for the first time in years, she felt light. When she finally arrived in Santa Fe, the town was bathed in golden morning light. The dry desert air wrapped around her like a warm shawl. Adobe buildings stood strong and still under the wide sky. The town felt like it had been waiting. She found a small room to rent behind an old bookstore run by a kind elderly couple who asked no questions. She introduced herself only as Maria, and paid in cash. The room was small, a single bed, a wooden desk, a window that faced the sunrise. That night she slept soundly for the first time in weeks. Over the next few days, Maria wandered the town. She walked through the historic plaza, visited art galleries, sat silently in the St. Francis Cathedral, her past and present overlapping in strange ways. But she couldn't shake the feeling that her journey wasn't over yet. Then, one Friday afternoon, while walking past a quiet street near the edge of town, she heard something unexpected, the call to prayer. It was faint, like a whisper carried by the wind. She followed the sound, and it led her to a modest stucco building with a green dome and a small wooden sign that read Masjid Noor. Her heart pounded. She hesitated at the steps, unsure whether she would be welcomed, or even allowed to enter. But something inside her urged her forward. Inside, she found a simple prayer hall, carpeted in green, with sunlight spilling through stained windows. A few women sat near the back, chatting softly, some with hijabs, some without. An older woman with silver hair and kind eyes noticed Maria's uncertainty, and walked over. "First time here?" she asked gently. Maria nodded. I'm not Muslim. I'm just trying to understand." The woman smiled warmly. "Then you're exactly where you're supposed to be." That simple sentence was like a balm to Maria's soul. The woman introduced herself as Layla, a former Episcopalian who had embraced Islam 15 years earlier. Over the next hour, they sat in the mosque's small tea room, drinking mint tea and talking about faith. Maria poured her heart out, the manuscript, the confusion, the confrontation with the church. Layla listened with patience and compassion. When Maria finished, Layla said, "Truth doesn't always come with comfort. But it always comes with peace. And peace is what Islam is built on." That night Maria returned to her rented room and stared at the ceiling. Her chest ached, not with fear, but with awe. Everything was changing. She didn't yet know where this path would lead, but for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of not knowing. She was ready to follow it. Weeks passed quietly in Santa Fe, each day wrapping Sister Maria in a gentleness she hadn't known before. She stopped wearing her habit, letting the desert breeze tangle her hair. She walked the sunlit streets with a paperback Quran in hand, highlighting passages, jotting down questions, reflecting deeply. Her soul had been cracked open, and now light was pouring in. Layla introduced her to a small study circle of women at Masjid Noor. They met every Tuesday after sunset. Some were born Muslim, others converts, each with a story, each with a wound they had turned into prayer. For Maria, it was like finding pieces of herself in others. One woman, Yasmin, shared how she had converted after losing her brother in the military. Another, Sophia, was a former Catholic like Maria, and she became a close companion. Over tea and shared meals, Maria began to feel something she hadn't felt in years: community. But there was one person who stood out. His name was Isaac, though everyone called him Isa. A quiet, thoughtful man in his late 30s, he worked as a groundskeeper at the mosque and taught Arabic to kids on weekends. He had grown up Catholic in Colorado, converted to Islam after studying comparative religion in college, and now lived a simple, peaceful life in Santa Fe. Maria first noticed him fixing a broken water spout near the mosque garden. He nodded politely, then continued his work. Over time, they exchanged greetings, then words, then longer conversations. They talked about everything: faith, loss, silence, the struggle of leaving behind a life you once thought was unshakable. "I know what it feels like," Isaac told her one evening. "To be standing between two worlds and not know where you belong." Maria looked down. "Sometimes I wonder if I've lost everything, just to find myself." Isaac nodded. "And sometimes, that's the only way we do find ourselves." It was during a study session, while discussing a verse from the Quran about the nearness of God, that Maria felt the certainty settle in her chest like a still lake. This was it. The answer she had been searching for, the peace she had longed for, it was here. That night, after Isha prayer, she approached the mosque's imam with quiet resolve. Her voice didn't tremble. "I want to become Muslim," she said. "I found what I was missing." The imam smiled warmly. "Then we welcome you, sister, with open arms and full hearts." On a bright Sunday morning, surrounded by her new friends, Maria stood at the front of the prayer hall. The air was still. The light was golden. Layla and Sophia held her hands. She took a deep breath and recited the Shahida. "I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is the messenger of Allah." And with those words, Maria became Asia, a name that carried the strength and wisdom of the Prophet's wife. A name that meant, "She who lives." Tears flowed down her cheeks. Her heart felt unburdened, her soul alive. In the following weeks, Asia immersed herself in learning. Isaac, calm, patient, never intrusive, became her guide and supporter. He taught her how to pray, how to recite Al-Fatiha, how to purify herself before worship. But more than anything, he taught her how to trust again. One evening, after walking through the canyon trails outside Santa Fe, Asia sat beside Isaac under a sky blanketed with stars. "I never thought I'd end up here," she whispered. "None of us do," he smiled. "But maybe the best things in life are the ones we never planned." Silence hung for a while. Then Isaac turned toward her. "Asia," he said gently, "I don't want to rush anything, but if there ever comes a day you feel ready, I'd be honored to walk this path with you, not just as a friend, but as your husband." Asia looked at him, his sincerity, his calm, his light, and nodded, her eyes full. "Yes," she said simply. Their nikah was modest. A small gathering in the masjid garden, a few friends, a bouquet of desert flowers, and a shared pot of lentil soup. No lavish gowns or ceremonies, just two hearts making a promise under the eyes of Allah. But peace does not come without its tests. Asia's family back in New York responded with heartbreak, confusion, and eventually, anger. Letters arrived, laced with disappointment and grief. Her younger sister accused her of betrayal. Her uncle, a priest, wrote that she had lost her soul. Asa cried. Often. But Isaac was always there, reminding her. "Your journey is not theirs to understand. Your truth belongs to you, and to God." She wrote back to her family with compassion. "I haven't turned away from God," she wrote. "I've just found Him more clearly. I love you still. And I always will." Some letters went unanswered. Others came back colder. But over time, the tone began to shift, from rage to confusion to silence, and finally, a faint curiosity. Asia didn't push. She just prayed. With every day, she grew stronger. She became a pillar of the Santa Fe Muslim community, helping organize women's classes, counseling new converts, and volunteering at the local food bank with Isaac by her side. She no longer needed the habit or the chapel walls to feel close to God. Her prayers now flowed from the earth beneath her and the sky above. Each sujud grounded her. Each verse calmed her. One day, as she and Isaac sat in the mosque garden watching the sun set, Asia smiled. "I used to think my life was ending when I left the convent," she said. "And now?" Isaac asked. "Now I know, it was just beginning." She looked toward the horizon. The desert, the sky, the stars, they all bore witness to the truth that had led her here. Not away from faith, but deeper into it. Asia had not left her past behind. She had transformed it into the light she would carry for the rest of her life.